The morning I lost my job started like any other morning. I woke up early, got dressed, drank my coffee, and left my home. I had worked at the same company for several years. I knew my job well, and I had become comfortable with my daily routine. Every morning, I took the same road, entered the same building, and greeted the same people. I never thought that one ordinary morning could change my life. When I arrived at work, everything looked normal. People were talking, computers were running, and everyone was busy with their work. I sat at my desk and started my usual tasks. A few hours later, my manager asked me to come to his office. First, I thought it was a normal meeting. Maybe he wanted to talk about a project. Maybe there was a new task for me. I walked into the office and sat down. My manager looked serious. He took a deep breath and told me that the company was making some changes. Then he said something I never expected. I was losing my job. For a few seconds, I could not say anything. I just sat there and listened. My mind was full of questions. What would I do now? How would I pay my bills? How would I support myself? What would happen to my future? I had never planned for this. I had worked hard. I had arrived on time. I had done my job. But suddenly, everything had changed. I walked out of the office with my belongings in a small box. The same building that had once felt familiar now felt completely different. When I stepped outside, I stood on the sidewalk and looked around. People were walking past me. Cars were moving through the street. Everything continued as normal. But my life did not feel normal anymore. I went home slowly. I did not know what to tell my family. I did not even know what to tell myself. That evening, I sat quietly and thought about my life. Losing my job felt like the end of something important. But deep inside, another thought began to appear. Maybe this was not the end. Maybe it was the beginning of something new. I did not know it yet, but losing my job would teach me lessons I could never have learned while everything was comfortable. Sometimes life changes without asking for permission. Sometimes a door closes before we understand why. And sometimes, behind that closed door, there is another door waiting to open. That night, I made one decision. I would not give up. I did not know what my next step would be, but I knew I had to take one. The next morning, I would start again. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. For a few seconds, I forgot what had happened. Then I remembered. I had lost my job. I looked at the clock and realized that I did not need to rush to work anymore. There was no meeting to attend, no desk waiting for me, no manager expecting me. For the first time in years, my morning was completely empty. At first, I thought having free time would feel good, but it did not. I felt worried and confused. I opened my phone and started looking for new jobs. I sent applications to different companies. I checked my emails again and again, but nothing happened. One day passed. then another, then another. Some companies never answered. Others sent polite messages saying they had chosen someone else. Every rejection made me feel a little weaker. I started asking myself difficult questions. Was I good enough? Did I have the right skills? Would I ever find another job? Sometimes I wanted to stop searching. I wanted to stay in bed and forget about everything. But then I remembered something important. Losing my job did not mean that I had lost my abilities. I still had experience. I still had skills. I could still learn. And most importantly, I could still try. So I changed my routine. Every morning I woke up early. I exercised for a short time. Then I spent a few hours looking for opportunities. After that, I studied something new. I improved my communication skills. I practiced speaking English. I watched lessons and read useful information. Slowly, my days became more organized. I still had problems, but I was no longer sitting and waiting for life to change. I was doing something. One afternoon, while walking through my neighborhood, I saw a small shop. There was a sign on the door asking for help with some computer work. I stopped and looked at the sign. For a moment, I thought about walking away. It was not the kind of job I had imagined for myself. But then I remembered my decision. I would not give up. So I walked inside. I introduced myself and explained that I was looking for work. The owner asked me a few questions. Then he asked me to help with a small task. I did my best. A few minutes later, he smiled and said something that gave me hope. He wanted me to come back the next morning. It was not my dream job. It was not a perfect opportunity, but it was an opportunity. And sometimes a small opportunity is all you need to begin again. That evening, I went home with a different feeling. I was still unemployed. My problems had not disappeared, but I felt hopeful for the first time in weeks. I realized something important. Sometimes we wait for a big opportunity while ignoring the small ones right in front of us. The next morning, I decided to take that small opportunity seriously. I had no idea where it would lead, but I was ready to find out. The next morning, I went back to the small shop. I did not know exactly what to expect. The work was simple, but I decided to take it seriously. I arrived early. I listened carefully. I asked questions when I did not understand something, and I tried to learn as much as I could. After a few days, I became more comfortable. The owner noticed that I was working hard. One afternoon, he asked me an unexpected question. He wanted to know why I had left my previous job. I told him the truth. I explained that I had lost my job because the company was changing. He looked at me and said, "Sometimes losing one opportunity creates space for another." His words stayed in my mind. That evening, I started thinking about my old life. Before losing my job, I had been comfortable. I had a regular salary. I knew what every day would look like, but I had also stopped learning. I had stopped asking myself what I really wanted. I was simply following the same routine. Losing my job had forced me to stop. It had given me time to think. I realized that I did not want to spend the rest of my life doing something only because it felt safe. I wanted to learn new skills. I wanted to become more confident. I wanted to build something of my own. So I started using my free time differently. Every evening I studied. I watched lessons. I practiced English. I learned about computers and online work. I wrote down new ideas in a small notebook. At the top of the first page, I wrote, "Start again." Those two words became important to me. Whenever I felt tired or disappointed, I looked at them. Start again. It reminded me that failure was not the end. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. The owner of the shop offered me more responsibility. He trusted me with important tasks. He even asked me to help with some online work for the business. I accepted. This gave me a chance to use the skills I had been learning. For the first time, I could see a connection between my difficult days and my new opportunity. If I had never lost my old job, I might never have discovered these new skills. I might never have started learning again. I might never have realized what I was capable of. That does not mean losing my job was easy. It was one of the hardest experiences of my life. But I learned that a difficult experience can sometimes teach you something valuable. You may lose something you thought you needed. You may feel confused. You may feel afraid. But that does not mean your story is finished. Sometimes you simply need to take the next step. One small step, then another, and another. I still did not know exactly where my new path would take me, but I was no longer afraid of the future. I had learned to trust myself, and I had learned that starting over does not mean starting from nothing. You start with everything you have learned. You start with your experience. You start with your mistakes. And you start with the strength you gained from difficult days. My life was changing again, and this time I was ready for it. A few months had passed since the morning I lost my job. My life was not perfect, but it was very different. I had learned new skills. I had become more confident, and I had stopped being afraid of change. The small shop had given me a chance when I needed it most. But the biggest change had happened inside me. Before losing my job, I believed that security meant having one stable job. Now I understood that security also comes from learning, adapting, and being ready for change. I continued working hard and learning every day. I also started thinking about my future more seriously. I wanted to build something that belonged to me, so I started a small online project. At first, almost nobody noticed it. There were days when I felt like giving up, but I remembered the difficult morning when I lost my job. I remembered how hopeless I had felt. Then I looked at how far I had come. I realized that progress does not always happen quickly. Sometimes you work for weeks or months before you see a result. That is why patience is important. You cannot always control what happens to you. You can lose a job. You can lose an opportunity. You can make mistakes. But you can control what you do next. You can learn. You can try again. You can improve. And you can keep moving forward. Looking back, I no longer saw losing my job as the end of my story. It was a turning point, pushed me out of my comfort zone, forced me to learn new things, and it helped me discover a stronger version of myself. Sometimes, life closes one door because you need to look for another. The new door may not look exciting at first. It may even look small. But if you walk through it, you may discover something you never expected. So if you are going through a difficult time right now, remember this. Your current situation is not necessarily your final destination. Do not let one failure define you. Do not let one rejection stop you. And do not let fear decide your future. Take one small step, then take another. Keep learning. Keep working. Keep believing in your ability to grow. Because sometimes the hardest chapter of your life can become the beginning of your best chapter. I lost my job, but I did not lose myself. I started again. And this time, I started with more courage, more knowledge, and a clearer idea of what I wanted. That was the lesson I needed. Sometimes a new beginning does not look like a new beginning. Sometimes it looks like an ending. But if you keep moving forward, you may discover that the ending was only the start of something better. Thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed this English lesson, like the video, subscribe to Speak English Fast, and share it with someone who is learning English. Keep listening, keep speaking, keep practicing, and never stop growing. Your next chapter may be better than you imagine. See you in the next lesson.